Hey everyone, welcome to Judging for the Win. I'm Dave, and this is my daily ruling. Amy taps a mountain for mana while she controls Toph, the first Metalbender, and a Caged Sun on red. What happens? Alright, so one downside of being an educational channel is that I cite my sources. In addition to adding a lot of time to my production process, this also means that I don't cover new cards from the new set until we have the new CR. This applies even in situations like this one that don't have any new mechanics, because a lot of the time when weird interactions come up, WotC will patch them out by changing the rules or sometimes one of the card's oracle texts. For example, when they errated Palliation Accord ahead of the introduction of shield counters in Capenna. While following this principle is definitely the way to go if you care about maximizing the amount of correct information you publish, it also means that I'm never the first to discuss and benefit from the massive engagement buffs you get whenever an interaction like this comes up. So, in case you somehow haven't heard this one yet, making Caged Sun into a land will mean that adding an additional mana with its bottom ability will match that ability's trigger condition, causing it to trigger again. And again. And again. Yay, an infinite mana combo! Except there's one extra complication. See, Caged Sun's bottom ability is a mana ability, and one of the things that means is that no player gets priority in between when this ability triggers and when it resolves. But every time it resolves, it triggers again. No player will ever get priority again in this game. Since it's stuck in an endless loop consisting only of mandatory actions, the game is a draw. Even if you had some instant speed way to spend that mana or break up the combo, you couldn't cast it because you would need priority to do that. This includes things like casting a spell with Split Second and unmorphing a face down creature. Both of those require you to have priority to be able to do them. Sacrificing one of the cards involved to a KCI or an Ashnod's Altar is a little bit more interesting because these cards also have mana abilities, and it's possible to activate these without having priority under certain circumstances. Unfortunately, those circumstances all require something in the game to be asking you for a mana payment, which isn't the case for the situation we're considering. So yes, because Caged Sun is stuck in an infinite loop of triggering its bottom mana ability, the game is a draw. And that's all I have for you today. Okay, well, alright, I guess there is actually one more complication, which is that maybe the Caged Sun's ability is not a mana ability after all. See, this rule says that a triggered ability that could produce mana, but triggers from an event other than activating a mana ability, is not a mana ability. The first instance of Caged Sun's ability in the scenario that we're considering triggered from the Mountain's ability resolving, which isn't exactly what this rule says, but at least it's close. All the subsequent instances trigger from a triggered ability causing you to add red, which is definitely different. This result is in direct conflict with the evaluation based on the rule that I showed earlier, which really made it look like this was a mana ability all the time. This distinction is significant because if an ability that's repeatedly triggering is not a mana ability, all those ways I said you couldn't stop this loop, well, they actually could, because if it's just a normal triggered ability, those use the stack. So you could respond to them by casting a Comet Storm or a Crozen Grip or unmorphing an Antuco Vigilante or activating a mana ability. So which is it? And this is why I always wait for the new CR to come out. I fully expected WotC to fix this one by changing one of these rules to remove the discrepancy, but of course, as you can see, they didn't. Since the rules as written contain a contradiction, we need to resort to something that's sadly becoming more and more common these days and decide based on rules as intended. Fortunately, unlike some of the other interactions that we've considered where there wasn't a lot of evidence either way or what we had to go on wasn't really conclusive, I think the evidence for this case points pretty strongly towards one side, that being the interpretation I shared earlier that the ability in question is a mana ability no matter what it's triggering from. In the first place, that's in keeping with a principle that WotC has generally stuck to for mana abilities, which is that being a mana ability is a property of the individual ability itself rather than being dependent on the game state or other circumstances. For example, Gaia's Cradle always counts as a mana ability, even if you have no creatures. In contrast, the ability of Priest of the Forgotten Gods is never considered a mana ability, even if you activate it with no targets. Obviously, this evidence isn't decisive, but it does point to the intention that Caged Sun should either always be a mana ability or never be one. And it's pretty accepted that the normal situations that come up where you get extra mana from tapping lands of the appropriate color are definitely intended to be a mana ability. The other, yet stronger piece of evidence will require a little bit of history to set up. The section of the CR that covers mana abilities was partially rewritten during the CR update between Alara Reborn and Magic 2010 as part of the Magic 2010 rules changes. Since these changes included removal of mana burn and changes to when mana pools emptied, it was natural that mana abilities would get looked at here also. Although the changes weren't very substantial, the Magic 2010 rules make a good starting point for the discussions that we'll need for the question we're considering. In particular, have a look at the text from the M10 CR of the two rules whose contradiction is the main focal point of today's episode. You can see that at this time they lined up exactly, and I'll also note that while the text of 605.5a is identical to its current version, the text of 605.1b is not. So let's investigate how and why the text of that rule changed. In Magic Origins, they added a rule clarifying how Gauntlet of Power interacted with effects like Contamination that changed the color of the mana that a land produces. As part of the same CR update, they changed the text of 605.1b, since now triggered abilities officially triggered from the resolution of activated abilities, not from their activation. Unfortunately, most likely due to an oversight, the text of 605.5a was not likewise updated. In Ixalan 1, the text of 605.1b was changed again to very nearly what it currently stands at today. The update bulletin published in connection with that change specifically mentioned that this was intended to make it so that Caged Sun's ability would always count as a mana ability, regardless of whether the land's ability that added the chosen color of mana was a mana ability itself or not. The crazy thing is, I'm not even sure if it was possible for this to come up without jumping through some serious hoops, because as far as I could find, there was no land with an ability that can add mana but doesn't count as a mana ability, so this distinction would only matter if you made like a Deathrite Shaman into a land or something exotic like that. I can't say this for sure, but I believe the Oracle text for Caged Sun was also changed at around the same time to mirror the language of this new rule. Certainly all future printings of this card feature the new wording. In Strixhaven, the text of 605.1b was changed to exactly what we have today by including the possibility to trigger from the resolution or activation of a mana ability. In light of the change that I highlighted during the Origins update, I'm not sure if this was strictly necessary, and unlike the previous ones, the update article doesn't talk about why it was changed, but that's the final iteration of this rule, so it's time for some conclusions. Based on this, I'm pretty confident ruling that the intended interaction is that Caged Sun is always a mana ability, and that it's therefore impossible to interrupt the loop with Toph as described earlier. Usually when I'm wrapping up these videos or I'm talking about some gap in the rules, I like to talk a little bit about what would need to happen in order to close that gap, but here, that's actually not necessary. We already know what it would take. WotC would just need to update the text of that rule to bring it in line with the other one, or remove it entirely, which would actually be the better solution. If you're familiar with computer programming, you probably already know that it's bad practice to repeat yourself in multiple places rather than using references, abstraction, or some sort of normalization. This scenario showcases exactly why. Here's the thing though, I could forgive that. I could see how in the original version, these really were two different rules with two different purposes, the latter one clarifying the former. Over time, a simple single oversight bloomed into a confusing problem as the former rule took on more responsibility and the latter was continually overlooked. And hypothetically, this issue could have come up before, but it would have required a lot of hoop jumping to set up, so I'm not surprised that no one caught it. The thing I am surprised, and to put it bluntly, disappointed about, is that no one fixed it after it was caught. There were videos talking about this interaction nearly a full year ago when Toph was first spoiled. Literally no one from Magic's rules team saw one TikTok, read one tweet, or Reddit thread and thought maybe let's go ahead and update that. I mean, they clearly have people at WotC who are online. How else would they have known that Monster Hunter's secret lair was going to bomb so hard that they needed to pull it in order to save embarrassment? Maybe I'm overestimating how much publicity this issue saw because everyone and their dog was asking me about this one, but I kind of figured that the people whose literal job it was to take care of this sort of thing would be in the same boat. Honestly, stuff like this is super discouraging to me. Videos like this one take tons of research to produce. Research, I might add, that was only possible because historical versions of the CR and the update articles are hosted on Academy Ruins and the Internet Archive rather than, I don't know, the official Wizards website. Like I mentioned before, I don't care about YouTube metrics. This channel isn't my job. It's a passion project, but I can only have that passion when I have faith that the problem that I'm working on actually has an answer. I remember feeling excitement when there was a question I didn't have a really good answer for, as I cracked open the CR like, ooh, I'm going to figure something new out. This was back in the days when Magic's rules managers would change stuff when it was found out that it was ambiguous how Contamination plus Gauntlet of Power or Caged Sun plus lands that added mana via a non-mana ability worked. In those days, doing research felt like solving a puzzle. In contrast, now, when a question comes up that we must know an answer to, we're too often met with the ignoble ignorabimus. That's all I have for you today. How did you do? Join me again next time for another Daily Ruling. Until then, I hope you have a great day.